Volker Grabowski on Thai and Lao manuscript cultures we visited, insights from newly discovered monastic collections in Luang Prabang. And at 10:45, we're going to have a panel discussion on ASEAN in ASEAN, representations of ASEAN and AC in Cambodian, Lao, and Thai press. And we are going to have lunch together at 12. And at 1:15 exactly, we're going to have the final parallel session on the 8th floor.
And I believe that many of you are new here to NIDA, especially to our program, School of Language and Communication. So let us take this opportunity to welcome you to the program and also to introduce our program to you. We have programs actually in master's degrees and
PhD.
Yeah, PhD. And I'm a PhD student, so let me talk a little bit about the PhD program here before I hand it over to you to talk about the MA program.
But just to make it easier for them,
okay.
If you have a booklet with you in your hand right now, you can go to the final page. You will see the posters showing the courses and the programs that we have in our faculty.
Okay, the PhD program here, we have two programs. The first one is in language and communication, and the other is teaching English as an international language. And the language and communication program, which I am in, we offer interdisciplinary courses. So if you are interested, you will be taking courses such as culture and media, discourse analysis, and that kind of stuff. And if you are interested in teaching, you may want to take the teaching program, Teaching English as an International Language.
And that's pretty much similar to the MA, except that in MA, we also have the Japanese culture and language on offer as well. We also have the English for professional development. That's what I'm actually in. And we also have English for teaching English as an international language in MA. If, for example, if they want to find out more information about this one and they cannot pick up what we are talking about here, where can they probably go to the find out more information about this one?
Yes, you probably want to go to our website, and the address is www.lc.nida.ac.th. And this is important, a reminder, if you want to publish in our proceeding, you may want to check out the information about the details on our website. That's the ICLC website, right?
Exactly.
I believe it's ICLC2017, .nida.ac.th.
You have such a good memory, yes.
But the deadline is February the 1st of 2007, on the 18th, next year.
And our guest speaker today, by the way, is really a polyglot. He can speak so many different languages, especially Thai. I think his Thai is really, really good, correct?
I believe so.
Because he can even read the manuscripts too. So you might want to, we're still waiting for more people to come in. So we still have a few minutes left now. If you want to grab some refreshments from outside, if you want to answer a call of nature, please do so now, because you don't want to miss even a minute during the session.
And by the way, if you have any questions, please let our staff members know. We will be happy to assist you.
So enjoy your relax now. Hello. Good morning, honorable guests, speakers, and ladies and gentlemen. First of all, we would like to introduce ourselves very formally now this time. My name is Saksit Lauha Walavutikun. You can call me Zach for short. I'm reading for an MA degree in English for Professional Development.
And my name is Gyatipong Rekwanchai, a PhD candidate in Language and Communication.
And first of all here, let me introduce you to today's agenda. Yesterday we heard a keynote address from Professor Dr. John Flowerdew on the data-driven approach in learning and helping us with our writing. But today we are going to hear from another prominent keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Volker Grabowski, on the topic of Thai and Lao manuscript cultures we visited, insights from newly discovered monastic collections in Luang Prabang. At 10:45, we are going to have a panel discussion on ASEAN in ASEAN, representations of ASEAN in ASEAN, and Cambodian, Thai and Lao Thai press. At 12, we are going to have lunch together on the 7th floor, and the final parallel session will be on the 8th floor, starting from 1:15 exactly.
Okay, and now we are privileged to have as our guest speaker today Professor Dr. Volker Grabowski. Since 2009, Dr. Volker Grabowski has been Professor of Thai Studies at the Asia-Africa Institute, University of Hamburg. From 1996 to 1999, he worked for the German Academic Exchange Service at the Department of Lao Language and Literature, National University of Laos. From 1999 to 2009, he was Professor of Southeast Asian History at the Institute of Ethnology. He is also co-author of several books. Recently, with his colleagues, he edited the volume The Thai Sangha and Modernity, Research at the Buddhist Archives of Luang Prabang, 2005 to 2015. Without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Volker Grabowski to give the keynote speech entitled Thai and Lao Manuscript Cultures Revisited, Insights from Newly Discovered Monastic Collections in Luang Prabang.
Please join us in welcoming Professor Dr. Grabowski.
Yeah, dear Assistant Professor Dr. Saksit Sengbun, dear Assistant Professor Dr. Gekanda Chaturongkachok, dear ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to express my profound gratitude for the honor of being invited to deliver the second keynote address at this 8th International Conference on Language and Communication here at NIDA. At the first conference day, many insightful papers were delivered on the importance of digital technologies for education and learning in the modern globalized world. It is a widespread belief that there is a linear evolution from orally transmitted literature to the invention of writing, giving rise to manuscript cultures, which were gradually superseded by printing technology since the 8th century in China, since the 15th century in Europe, and in other regions like Thailand and Laos later, since the maybe 19th century. At the beginning of the 21st century, we would finally observe the replacement of print culture by the rapid spread of digitization all over the globe. This assumption, I would argue, might be wrong. I will show in my lecture that manuscripts are by no means a phenomenon of the distant past. On the contrary, in many parts of present-day Thailand, in Laos, and in Thai-speaking areas in eastern Burma and southwestern China, manuscripts are still being produced. Thai and Lao manuscript cultures have existed not only alongside oral traditions, but also continue to flourish long after the spread of print culture. In my lecture, I will first give a short introduction into the manuscript cultures of the Thai and Lao world. Thereafter, I will discuss the preservation, storage, and documentation of manuscripts by taking as an example the case of Luang Prabang, where I had been carrying out my own research in Lao manuscripts over the last, say, 7 years or 8 years. Finally, I will provide some insights into Lao manuscript culture by discussing the corpus of two newly discovered collections. One collection was built up for his personal use by Kamchan Virachitto, the former abbot of Wat Sen Sukharam, one of the most outstanding intellectual monks in Laos during the second half of the 20th century. And the second collection, which is the main focus of my keynote, is the lost corpus of a monastic library which reappeared very recently in the storeroom of the abbot's abode in one of the monasteries, smaller monasteries in Luang Prabang. So first, just a very brief overview of Thai and Lao manuscript cultures. The Thai or Thai Kadai linguistic family, with over 100 million speakers, comprises a vast territory running from the Chinese province of Guizhou, here on the map, in the north to the Malay Peninsula in the south, and from the island of Hainan in the east to Assam, northeastern India, in the west. Only the large southwestern Thai, so the group with a red color, living predominantly in mainland Southeast Asia, have adopted Indic scripts. These scripts have developed from a variant of the Indian Grantha script, which is usually called Pallava script in Southeast Asia, called after the Pallava dynasty of southern India around the 6th century AD. Through close contact with the older cultures of the Mon and Khmer, the Thai developed their own writing system, as did the Thai and the Lao, the northern Thai, or Khmer Mueang, and the Shan. This chart shows the evolution of Thai scripts in a very simplified model. All modern scripts in mainland Southeast Asia are the product of historical development leading from the Pallava script, a so-called post-Pallava script, first the Old Khmer and Old Mon scripts. The variants of the Dhamma script, or Tuakson Tham, have developed from Old Mon, whereas the modern Thai and modern Lao scripts have developed from Old Khmer, whereas the Tham script has predominantly been used for religious texts. Secular texts were written usually in the precursors of the modern Thai and Lao scripts. In fact, the real situation is much more complicated as this more refined model demonstrates. And you see on the left side, the left-hand side, the various manuscript cultures that are spread over mainland Southeast Asia. The eldest inscriptions in Pallava script which have been found in present-day Thailand are from the 7th century of the Common Era. Just an example. On the right side, you see the fragments of an undated Sanskrit inscription from the central Thai province of Nakhon Pathom, which pertains to the donation of Buddha images, a temple hall, and an orchid garden of 170 coconut trees to that monastery. On the right side, you see the oldest dated inscription found on Thai soil. It is a bilingual Sanskrit Old Khmer inscription from Sa Kaeo province, bordering Cambodia. The oldest dated inscription written in a Thai script and in a Thai language is the inscription Sukhothai number 1, the Siddhartha Phokun Ram Kam Heng. And I will not go into detail of this famous inscription that had been, the object of a dispute among scholars more than 20 years ago, long before my time. While the earliest evidence of Thai epigraphy date to the 14th century, the oldest surviving Thai palm leaf manuscripts, or Nang Su Bai Lan, date to the second half of the 15th century. Palm leaf is not only the most widely used, but due to the region's subtropical climate, also the most durable soft writing support. In central and southern Thailand, palm leaf manuscripts were used almost exclusively for Buddhist texts, which were usually written in Pali, the sacred language of Theravada Buddhism. Here you see a typical palm leaf manuscript from central Thailand. It is kept at the Thai National Library. And this one is a typical palm leaf manuscript from northern Thailand with a beautifully decorated wooden cover which keeps together the palm leaf bundle, or Pu Mai Lan. Actually, this manuscript is being kept at our Institute of Thai Studies at Hamburg University, and you see here the leaf with the main text, and hardly visible because it was not blackened with a black soot, the colophon, which can be read, when you hold the palm leaf against the sunlight. And I just, it's a very short colophon which I transcribed and translated. Evidently, the rectangular shape of the leaves directed the writing of Indian-derived scripts from right to left along the long side of the material. The number of lines that you can write on one side of a folio differs. It can be 12 lines, up to 12 lines like in Burmese manuscripts, but then, very difficult to read. And there are, in Thailand, central Thailand and northern Thailand, it's usually standard 5 lines. And in northeastern Thailand, which is ethnically a Lao inhabited area, and in in Laos itself, 4 lines would be the standard. In contrast, the Leporello format was used for secular texts such as chronicles, legal texts, medical and astrological treatises, official documents, non-religious literary works, and also on occasion Buddhist texts. For these manuscripts, a cardboard-like paper made out of the bark of the koi tree was used. The grayish koi paper was written on both sides, either with a black ink or first painted with a layer of lamp black, as in these cases you see here, and then written on with a yellowish or golden ink or white chalk. The covers of both Samut Koi and palm leaf manuscripts were often decorated with lacquer and gold, and they were kept in elaborately fashioned wooden boxes. On the right-hand side, you see a fine example of a Samut Koi, as such Leporello manuscripts are called. It is from the State Library of Berlin and contains a Ramakien text composed by King Taksin of Thonburi, and it is dated, according to the colophon, 19th of November, 1780. 2 different scripts are found in the Siamese manuscript culture, which for the most part cover the territory of the Ayutthaya kingdom. Until the beginning of the 20th century, the Cambodian Mool script was used for works written in Pali. It was also frequently used for religious texts in the vernacular. We call it here Khom script, Tuakson Khom. This is an example here, you see, of another Samut Koi written in black ink on grayish paper, which demonstrates the use of several languages, in this case Thai and Pali, and several scripts, Khom and Thai, in one and the same manuscript. The main text, it's Pramalai Luang, an illustrated manuscript of a very well-known story of a monk traveling between hell and heavens. The colophon, that's the lower part of the folio, is written in Thai. The colophon is here of particular interest as it records the donnor's wish to be reborn as a family, as husband, wife, and their only son, also on the next life. And it's quite funny, the last sentence of this colophon expressing especially the wish of the wife to be reborn as the only wife of her husband. That means maybe in this existence, she was not the only wife. Okay. On the other hand, manuscripts with secular contents were only written in the Thai script. The Siamese manuscript culture thus differs from the manuscript cultures of the Burmese, Mon, and Khmer, where Pali texts were always written in the respective script of the country. So Burmese script used for writing both Pali and Burmese, Khmer script for both Pali and Khmer, and so on. Using 2 scripts also characterizes the manuscript culture of the Thai peoples living in the large valleys of the Southeast Asian highland. The various so-called secular scripts of the northern Thai, the Thai Yuan, the Lao, the Thai Khön, the Thai Lu, and the Shan were contrasted with the religious script known as the Tham script. Duokson Tham, already mentioned. This script probably originated in the 14th century as an offshoot of the Mon script of Haripunchai. In the course of the political and cultural expansion of the Lanna kingdom in the second half of the 15th century, Lanna was, Chiang Mai was the center of Theravada Buddhist learning. This script spread to the Shan areas of Sipsong Panna, finally to Lansang, and even in areas which are like Geungma, Mung Lam, and Jinggu in Sumao prefecture in southern Yunnan that are actually inhabited by Tainur people who received the Theravada Buddhism from Qingtung. And so they were influenced by this particular script as well, which still in the 19th century was more widespread than Thai script. And American missionaries even thought to use this script for propagating the gospel in mainland Southeast Asia and southwestern China. Using two scripts also characterizes the manuscript culture of the Thai in northern Thailand, who until the 17th century also used a secular script, which was the main script used for stone inscriptions of northern Thailand, and this script was called the tamarind pot script due to the shape of the characters, or tu akson phak kham. Regional variations of the Dhamma script, the Tham script, are only slight, and the lexemes of the Thai languages written in the Dhamma script are virtually identical. So, if at least one of the languages and scripts, for instance, the Lana script or Lana version of the Tham script and Phasa Kamuang, are understood, then it is quite easy to learn, or relatively easy, the other variants of the script in northern Laos, in southwestern China, or the Shan states as well. The major writing support in the area using the Tham script, I call it the Tham script cultural domain, is also palm leaf, especially in Laos and in northern Thailand. In contrast, traditionally, the manuscripts of the Dai Lu and the Shan were usually made of the bark of the sa tree. Thus, the folding books made of mulberry paper or sa paper are colloquially called papsa. In addition, bound books exist, notably in the Dai Lu areas, where each piece of paper has been folded over once vertically, so that it becomes much longer than it is broad. By folding the paper, both the front and the back page of one sheet can be used for writing. These sheets of paper are sewn together along one of the vertical sides, as you can see here, in the manuscript that I purchased from its scribe in 2005, so not that long ago, during one of my field research in Sipsong Panna, from the scribe just a few days after he had accomplished writing it. It is a divination text. You can see here, it consists of 60 folios, each of which predicts or gives recommendations for a male who would like to find a suitable marriage partner according to the year of birth in the 60-year cycle. Quite a funny and very popular text, or we call it here Pramachat. For the Dai, or Thai, Lao, and other Dai peoples, donating a Buddhist manuscript was an important act of religious devotion, as is evident from the usually brief colophons that mention the scribe, donor, and the date of the manuscript's completion. The manuscript was the medium of the Thai book culture well into the 19th century, while in the first half of the 20th century, the modern printing press strongly reduced the production of manuscripts, especially in Thailand and Laos, during the past decades, particularly in Yunnan and in the Burmese Shan area. The Thai manuscript culture has experienced a revival. It was part of my own research in those areas, and I will not go too much into detail, just to say that this culture even survived the vicissitudes of the quite cruel Chinese Culture Revolution, and since the 1980s we see revival of manuscript production. As you can see here, the picture of one of the still active scribes whom I visited a couple of years ago, just without having made an appointment, and when I entered his living room, he was doing his favorite job, I mean, writing manuscripts. The huge majority of manuscripts in Thailand, and I said more than 90% are written on palm leaf, are kept in monastic repositories called Ho Tham, or House of the Dhamma, because they are dedicated homes to Buddhist scriptures. These libraries are integrated into the monastic site, the Wat, of which they embrace the organization and architectural style. In northern Thailand, they are called the Hopitok, a house for the basket of the scriptures, or Hotrai in the rest of the country. In the early ages, only modest collections had to be stored and protected. Small and beautiful repositories were born of these restrictive conditions, especially as reading, recitation, and study did not take place within them. Here you see on the left side the Hotrai of Wat Pratat Haripunchai in our home province in Lamphun, and on the right side it's a picture of Wat Sung Men in Phrae, a small monastic library that contains one of the largest collection of manuscripts, more than 15,000 palm leaf fascicles. It's incredible. This leads us to Luang Prabang. Actually, in Wat Sung Men, the library was built in the 1830s by a monk, Kuba Gantana, who had copied hundreds of manuscripts when he spent many months of his life in Luang Prabang. And it was part of a program for the revival of manuscript culture in northern Thailand, in Lanna, after many decades of warfare with Burma. Yeah, here you see a historic picture of Luang Prabang from the first half of the 20th century. Luang Prabang, which is a World Heritage City, inscribed on the list of UNESCO World Heritage Sites 20 years ago, and it is maybe the city in Southeast Asia with the highest density of monasteries at all. Yeah, here you see a map of Luang Prabang, which had been the main pillar of Lao Buddhism since the mid-14th century, even after the transfer of the royal capital of the Lan Sang kingdom from Luang Prabang to Vientiane in 1560. The city of Luang Prabang, situated at the confluence of the Khan and Mekong rivers, maintained its prestigious status as the spiritual center of Lao Buddhism. A total of 33 monasteries and a town of less than 50,000 inhabitants, not included an even larger number of abandoned monasteries, and many other historical Buddhist sites give testimony of the city's rich cultural heritage. In the last century, many of Laos intellectually influential and charismatic monks came from Luang Prabang, not from Vientiane. One of them was Pakamchan Virachitta Mahathira, who lived from 1920 to until his death in 2007, the late abbot of Wat San Sukaram. He was also a passionate collector of various kinds of art objects, historical photographs. So we collected more than 35,000 so-called photographs from Luang Prabang since the 1880s, official documents, manuscripts, and religious publications. Pakamchan's impressive personal collection of more than 400 palm leaf and mulberry paper manuscripts have been inventoried, documented, and digitized, along with similar collections held in several other monasteries in the peninsula of Luang Prabang, in the project Rare Manuscripts of Great Buddhist Thinkers of Laos, digitization, translation, and relocation at the Buddhist archives of Luang Prabang. This project had been supported by the Endangered Archives program of the British Library from February 2015 until August 2016. Here you see the Sala Thamavihan, a two-story building within the confines of Wat Suvarnakili, which houses our Buddhist archives. It's very close to the confluence of the two rivers I mentioned. Pakamchan Virachitto showed an impressive scope of interests beyond his studies of the Buddhist doctrine and his preaching activities. Although Jataka texts, Buddhist chronicles, and Anisong, preaching texts, from the majority of his personal collection, many manuscripts contain medical and astrological treatises, secular literature, or are personal notebooks. Limitations of time do not allow me to go into details. I just would like to show you two highlights. This is highlight number 1. It's Gamavaja text, so the text used for the ordination of monks and novices. It's quite an old manuscript, dated 1791, so an age of more than 220 years. And it is written in the Lana version or variant of the Tam script. And according to the main colophon, which is not here visible, it has been produced in a village near the city of Chengshan. But Chengshan at that time was still a Burmese fortress, had not yet been liberated by the Siamese and Chiang Mai forces. That happened 13 years later. How it came to Luang Prabang. So my guess is that it was brought together by the people of Chengshan. Part of them were deported and resettled in Luang Prabang, others in Ratburi, others in Shanghai, Saraburi, and many other places. But there is another colophon written, and you see it's not on the blackish, but in the grayish paper, and it is a colophon written by Pakamachan himself, who just, studied this manuscript and just wrote some comments on these two colophons. Another manuscript, I would say, which is a highlight, is a very long Papsa manuscript written on grayish Sa paper. It is glossary of more than 2,300 Burmese words, Burmese phrases. It has 3 columns. First column are the Burmese words and phrases written in Burmese script. The second column are the same words and phrases, but written in the Tam script, in the Chingtung or Daikun variant of the Tam script, so that people who are not able to read Burmese can still pronounce the words. And then the translation follows on the third column. And it is not really a Daikun translation, because there are phrases like Arai, Zhao Yu Ti Nai, so hybrid verb, Zhao, okay, but Yu Ti Nai, the Lao would say Zhao Yu Sai, but not Zhao Yu Ti Nai. So I guess it was, to make a long story short, it was produced probably before the 1950s, for the purpose of being used maybe by Lao monks who attended the Chatta Sankhayana, the 6th Buddhist World Council in Yangon between 1954 and 1956. Just in order to communicate with the Burmese monks. So it's quite unique document, which we found just by chance. I will skip over. Yeah. In the final days of our project, of the Endangered Archives program, in March 2016, members of our team discovered hundreds of palm leaf manuscripts in a storage room of an abbot's abode or kuti of a monastery called Wat Sibun Huang. It's not the Wat Sibun Ruang here near Nida, but I just passed by, this morning, but just a monastery just opposite our Buddhist archives. And this discovery came as a big surprise, since nobody could imagine that a very small monastery like this Wat Sibun Huang, which never had a monastic library, a hotrai, would hold such precious documents. The manuscripts were kept in 6 traditional wooden boxes and in 1 cupboard, though seemingly not used for a long time, yet they were mostly in good physical condition. However, the manuscripts were neither kept in any order, nor were any tags attached to the manuscript bundles. bearing inventory numbers of the Preservation of Lao Manuscripts program, which in the 1990s had made a survey of thousands of monastic repositories all over Laos. I mean, just as a proof that such inventory or documentary projects, which we also have here in Thailand, would never cover the total, of monastic collections, as many manuscripts are just kept in the personal abodes of monks and other senior abbots. You can take a look at the storeroom of the abbot's living quarters when our team entered it. Here the first survey was taken, and finally manuscripts, more than 800 fascicles, were transferred to our Buddhist archives, situated just on the opposite side of the street. It became clear that at least a substantial number of manuscripts from this corpus were donated by abbots and monks of a neighboring monastery called Wat Simungkun, or by monks from other monasteries and lay people of surrounding communities, including members of the traditional nobility of Luang Prabang, as the names of donors frequently contain the title Moon, San, or Paya. And even some manuscripts donated by the king of Luang Prabang and other members of the royal family. Though several manuscripts are from the late 18th and early 19th century, the bulk dates from the first half and even the second half of the 20th century. The overwhelming prominence in this manuscript collection of scribes, sponsors, and donors associated with Wat Simungkun makes it most likely that these manuscripts were originally kept in the Hall Trai of that monastery, which nowadays is used as a monk's dormitory and no longer contains any manuscripts. So our reconstruction is based on this corpus that probably at some time in the 1980s, when the political situation in Laos was quite unstable, probably for reasons of safety, the manuscripts were just removed from the monastic repository of Wat Simungkun to a storeroom in the neighboring monastery where we detected it last year. Here I just show you the monastic depository, the Hotrai of Wat Simungkun on the left side. And here we found, luckily in our archive of monks' images, the former abbot of Wat Sibun Huang reading manuscripts from our collection. And this is dated in the 1990s. So we can say at least since the early 1990s, these manuscripts were already at the present site. I will skip over, just to show you a wooden inscription which decorates the entrance door of this storeroom, which has also a nice text which we transcribed and translated. I will skip it over just to see the Vihara or the Sim, as they call it in Luang Prabang, of Wat Simungkun. Another wooden inscription which is quite interesting for documentary purposes that I'll also skip over. And now come to the corpus itself of 540 manuscripts and more than 840 fascicles, some manuscripts containing more than one pug or more than one fascicle. And you see here, according to genre, of course, the dominance, as we might expect, of religious texts like Jataka texts, Buddhist chronicles, and of course, doctrinal texts from the Sutta, Vinaya, and Abhidhamma, but also a number of manuscripts related to secular matters. Most of the manuscripts have colophones. Not all of them, but most. Different to the manuscript cultures of some areas like Tamil or Cambodian Khmer manuscript culture, Thai, Lao manuscripts have colophones that record the date when the writing of the manuscript has been accomplished. Just to give you an example of such a colophon. In Judah Sakarat 1205, Ka Mao year, on the 11th waxing day of the 12th lunar month, the 5th day of the week, Kotsi day, the writing was finished at the time of the morning drum. You can calculate, according to the Western calendar, it's Thursday, the 2nd November, 1843. We found also a few manuscripts that allow us to reconstruct the writing process, like this one. In Judah Sakarat 1285, Ka Kai year, the writing of this manuscript fascicle started on the 4th waning day of the 2nd lunar month and was finished on the 5th day of the following lunar month, the 1st day of the week. Was the week of the Sunday. The writing of this manuscript fascicle was finished at 8 o'clock in the morning. So that is it's untypical in the way that it also records the day, the moment when the scribe started copying the text. And so I calculated, made a rough calculation and arrived at an average speed of 18 lines or 2.25 folios written on both sides, recto and verso, per day. At first glance, this is not an impressive performance for an experienced scribe, but we should take into consideration that the scribe, a monk in most cases, could devote only a few hours a day for the studying and copying of manuscripts. Apart from the dating, colophones reveal a lot more about the background of the manuscripts, its production, purpose, and usage. Colophones appear at the end of the manuscripts. They either directly follow the main text, from which it is separated by a blank line or by a smaller size letters, as is the case in the last example, or they also appear on the recto side of an additional folio. Thai Lao manuscript tradition makes a clear distinction between the writer or author of a manuscript and a copyist. Lao manuscripts usually use the terms pu tem or pu kien or pu richana for denoting the scribe who would call himself Ka or serf of the Buddha. Besides, a number of colophones also mention the Pusang, literally meaning the builder, the maker of a manuscript. But the term Pusang usually refers to the donor, the person who donates tawai or tan, the manuscript to a monastery or to monks. David Weidlinger lists a number of common colophon subjects which appear in Northern Thai religious manuscripts, which I will not read. Now here you can take a look at these most frequently appearing aspects. Though very few colophones contain all 11 subjects, a combination of them are typical at least for all manuscripts, both in Pali and in the Thai vernacular, with a religious content. Some colophones of our corpus from Wat Sibun Huang are scribal colophones. The vast majority of manuscripts, 90%, that have colophons express the wishes of their sponsors and donors, because without their contribution, this manuscript would never have seen the light of the day. While few manuscripts have colophons which are exclusively scribal, many more record the names of both the scribe and the persons who sponsored the making of the manuscript and related it to the Sangha. In general, the intentions for making the donation and the wishes expressed in the colophons pertain to the principal monastic or lay supporters, the so-called Mula Saddha or Mula Sattha, the religious faithful who took the initiative of making the production of the manuscript possible. This will be explored in more detail in a few minutes. The three wishes that seem evenly distributed all over the periods are that the writing of the manuscript will eventually lead to Nibbana, or the Vieng Keo, the splendid city, or the peak of Nibbana, that will lead to obtain merit, punya, or rewards of merit, pahala anisamsa, either for the writer, respectively sponsor and donor, his family, or other people, and that the copying of the manuscript or its sponsoring and donation to the Sangha will be a support, kamchu, for the teachings of Buddha, the Sasana, to stay until its completion of 5,000 years, because it's a widespread belief that the maximum duration of the teachings of the Buddha of the Sasana will be 5,000 years and no longer. Until then, much later, the fifth Buddha, Maitreya, will appear and restore the teachings of the Buddha. So you find in colophons wishes like those, that express the desire of the scribe and or donor to be reborn in the age of Pra-Arya Maitreya. Many colophons are rather short, providing only the date when the often unnamed scribe completed the writing of the manuscript, and followed by a brief statement that the merit gained from the making and donation of the manuscript might support the teachings of the Buddha, as already explained. That does not mean that the shortest colophons are always the least interesting. The very brief colophon of the following manuscript, for example, states that the female sponsor initiated the making of the manuscript to celebrate her birthday anniversary, an intention which she shared with other sponsors of manuscripts, such as the already mentioned Abbot Pakamchan Virajito, who used to sponsor the making of manuscripts on the occasion of his 24th, 36th, 48th, and other round birthday anniversaries. Other colophons are relatively long and may even run over more than one side of a palm leaf. Apart from the dating, the recording of the names and principal sponsor, the mention of the motives and intentions for making the manuscript, the aspirations a scribe or a sponsor, a donor had for the good results of the acquired merit, some of the longer colophons also contain some personal expression, including biographical details. The structure of such colophons is analyzed in the following chart, discussing two samples which are from different periods and whose sponsors or donors are from different social background. On this slide, you see how the typical colophon is structured. After the exact date when the writing of the manuscript was finished, usually the start of the colophon, the names of the scribe and of the donor, the Mula Sattha, his wife, or vice versa sometimes, the wife and then her husband, along with all their Taulan Lane, their offspring, or their Pantupong or Pantuvong, their whole family, including are mentioned and then followed by the title of the work, of the text. Thereafter, the objectives for making the manuscript are recorded, along with the personal wishes of the donor, and finally, a rather standardized or formalized phrase in Pali like Nibbana Baramam Hontu, Nibbana is the most supreme goal, it concludes the colophon. One of the most interesting colophons with regard to the wishes and aspirations of a sponsor or donor is recorded in the unusually long colophon of the untitled manuscript with the text Supasit Kaplok, or Moral Teachings of the World. The manuscript sponsor and donor was a monk and had not yet been invited to undergo a consecration ceremony called Therapisek, and is thus mentioned under his honorific title Mom. Kamdi, as was his name, he expresses his concern that he might be unable to recognize sinful acts and thus asks for being endowed with the satipanya, or consciousness and wisdom, in his present life and all future existences. It seems that Mom Kamdi, who completed the writing of his manuscript on Saturday, 12 June 1852, was of modest social background, as indicated by his repeated wish of economic wealth. I mean, such wishes you find, maybe not appropriate for monks, you find from time to time in colophons. Not in this corpus, but one of my favorite colophons is from a Lao manuscript dated in the early 1980s, at a time when, just a few years after the founding of the Lao People's Democratic Republic, hundreds of thousands of Lao people fled to Thailand and also to the United States and other Western countries. And this monk said he wished to be reborn as Luk Sethi, อยู่ที่สหรัฐอเมริกา the son of a wealthy man in the United States of America. Only a small amount of colophons in the 541 manuscripts of the Wat Si Bun Huang collection record the names of scribes. The vast majority just state that the writing was accomplished at a certain date, directly followed by the names of the leading and initiating monastic or lay supporters and their intention for sponsoring the making of the manuscript. 32 colophons explicitly mention the scribe's name, and in some cases also his affiliation to a certain monastery or village, respectively town quarter. 4/5 of the known scribes were members of the Sangha, either abbots or other monks, and in some cases also novices. Only 6 scribes were laymen, of whom 2 were called Chan, a short form of Achan, or learned man, while the other 4 lay scribes were former monks called Tit in Lao. I will not go too much into detail, but to show you that these colophons are a mine of information, a gold mine of information, I would say, also on the social history of the area under study. The principal lay supporters who sponsored the making of manuscripts were mostly couples, with the name of the husband mentioned first, followed by his wife. The couple would include their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and the whole family, as already mentioned, as beneficiaries of the merit resulting from the donation. A surprisingly large number of colophons mentioned a woman as the principal lay supporter, either alone or together with her husband, whose name would be listed at second position. These women are recognizable by the titles Sao, or Nang for younger, or middle-aged women, or Pa for elderly women, or simply Me'ok, which in Lao language means lay women. One is tempted to speculate that in cases where a woman was the only leading lay supporter, she was either an unmarried woman or, in most cases, a widow. In the latter case, children and other family members would explicitly be mentioned as beneficiaries, and in many cases, then her husband later mentioned as also, I mean, the deceased husband, also as one of the beneficiaries for this merit-making act. In the colophon which I show you now, 3 women decided to jointly sponsor the making of this manuscript. The first woman was probably an unmarried or widowed elderly woman, whereas the other 2, called Sao, were young women with 2 little children who might have already been widowed or divorced. The colophon appearing on the recto side of folio 7 of the fragment of a manuscript recording a Buddhist chronicle, Tamnan Pha Samang, reads, in Julia Sagarat 1278, and so on and so on. The writing was finished at the time of the monastery drum. Me Ok, Uan from Ban Sang Wi, the Harkom village, as well as Sao Pan and Sao Tong, along with their 2 little children, jointly sponsored the manuscript fascicle entitled Tamnan Pha Samang, so to ensure that the teachings of the Buddha will last until the end of 5,000 years. Furthermore, all of us wish to be reborn in heaven. And Nibbana Paramam Sukham, Nibbana is the highest stage of happiness. Though the sponsoring of manuscripts was usually the joint undertaking of married couples for the benefit of their families, other bonds between 2 or 3 leading initiators are testified as well. One manuscript was sponsored by mother and son, another by a novice and his abbot, the latter also being the scribe. The joint sponsorship of monks and lay persons, not necessarily their own relatives, are also documented. Many of the sponsors were members of the nobility or aristocrats, as their titles Pia or Paya, Moon or San indicated. Unlike the social background and the home village or home monastery, the ethnic origin of scribes as well as of sponsors is never indicated, but with one notable exception. I'm only speaking about this particular corpus. The colophon of the following manuscript states that in September 1927, 2 Chinese migrants with the names of Xian and Dong sponsored together with their Lao wives and their parents, all relatives and children, the making of a manuscript entitled Tamachak. The perhaps most surprising discovery of our collection is the relatively large number of royalty among acting as sponsors and donors of manuscripts. And I would say these manuscripts are not particularly different, I mean, in outer appearance from manuscripts that would be sponsored or have been sponsored by normal persons, non-royal persons. I will now go back. Finally, the colophons provide some insights into the cooperation between different sponsors and between sponsors and scribe. Though the colophons specify that the benefits of the merit derived from the making of manuscripts would go primarily to the sponsor and donor, and may even be transferred to the dead relatives, the scribes expect to gain some benefits as well. In one manuscript, the scribe, a monk, named Bhikkhu Siddhipanya, asked the sponsor, novice, Lao Chua, in the final sentence of the colophon, may you share the result of your merit with me. Please do it. Novice, Pa ơi. The manuscript, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, this manuscript exactly is able to specify how scribes and sponsors cooperated in the making of the manuscript. The first of 2 colophons appear directly after the end of the main text, and was written by the scribe himself, noting the year 1964 and the time of the day, but interestingly neither the lunar month nor the day of the moon phase When he finished the writing of the manuscript, the scribe mentions the names of the principal lay supporters, a couple from a village called Ban Ting Hong, before recording his own name and monastic affiliation. Tu, or monk, Puma from Wat Ban Sanghai, the monastery of the Potter village that is now a touristic site. Most significant is the final phrase, I also wish to get a huge amount of merit. ขอบุญนำหลายๆ แด่ทอน The second colophon appears on the recto and verso sides of a separate folio and is written in smaller size letters, in a different ductus, maybe even by a different hand, and running over 3, respectively 2 lines per side. It seems that the second colophon reflects the production process from the sponsor's perspective, describing the division of responsibilities between the 2 principal lay supporters who paid for the remuneration of the scribe, whose name is no longer mentioned, and the abbot of Wat Sibun Huang, who provided the palm leaves for inscribing the text, called Patai Loka Vithan. In a similar vein, the colophons of other manuscripts reflect shared responsibilities of scribe and sponsors as well. This manuscript, which bears the title Samat Si Sunthon, is another striking example. The manuscript comprises 13 leaves. The left margins of the verso sides bear a rather unusual dual foliation in Lao numerals above and Arabic numerals below, starting with the number 3 on the verso side of the folio 1, thus indicating that the first 2 leaves of the palm leaf manuscript are missing. While the last folio bears only the title on its verso side, the colophon appears on the recto side of the second last folio. This colophon, running over 4 lines, is most interesting. The first line is written in small size letters. The 2 strokes at the end of the line mark the end of a textual unit that records the date when the writing of the manuscript was accomplished. That was in May, June 1923, and mentions the name of the owner of the palm leaves, or Zhao Lan, and the name of the scribe, who were both monks but different persons. The following 2 lines are indented. They are written like the first line in the Lao version of the Tam script, but in larger size letters. This central part of the colophon records the name of the sponsor, a monk called Bhikkhu Titsapanya, who was apparently the same person who provided the scribe with a writing support, with a palm leaf. And I quote, I, Bhikkhu Tissa, sponsor the making of this Samatsi Sonton manuscript fascicle to support the teachings of Lord Gautama, at least to last until the end of 5,000 years. May all my aspirations and wishes be fulfilled. Nibbana Pachayo Huntu me anakata kale nicham duvam duvam. May this be a condition for me to reach Nibbana in the future, continuously and forever. Please consider any mistakes which might have occurred. My mind was not in conformity with my body. The last sentence clearly reflects the scribe's deep concern about any inaccuracies and mistakes which might have occurred during the process of inscribing the text. The scribe was likely a junior monk and still lacking experience as a scribe. Thus he calls himself by the diminutive Lao pronoun kanoi, or little serf, when apologizing to the more senior sponsor addressed with the respectful title Zhao Mom, as the last line of the colophon written in the modern sexual Lao text states. I will now come to my conclusion. it could be demonstrated that the impressive collection of more than 540 palm leaf manuscripts kept in the storeroom of the abbot's living quarters in Wat Sibun Huang originally did not belong to this monastery, but was transferred from the library of a neighboring monastery, Wat Simung Kun, at some time between 1976 and 1990, for still unknown reasons. Many of the monk scribes of whom we know the names and monastic affiliations from the colophons were based at this monastery. Many of the sponsors and donors of manuscripts were monks and novices associated with the Wat Simung Kun as well. They are, in fact, more numerous and figure more prominently than those attached to Wat Sibun Huang or any other monastery in Luang Prabang. Wat Simung Kun has been lacking a responsible abbot over a period of several decades. This may explain why the monastery's collection of manuscripts had fallen into oblivion. We know very little about the history of that monastery during the 20th century. Therefore, it is exciting to see how the colophons of the manuscripts from the Wat Sibun Huang collection shed new light on the personality of at least one leading intellectual monk who appeared quite prominently in that collection. Though the structure and content of the colophons of the corpus as a whole are hardly different from what we know from other Lao, Northern Thai, or Dai Lu manuscripts which bear religious texts, some aspects are nevertheless astonishing, such as the relatively high percentage of women serving as principal lay supporters, or the presence of royalty among the sponsors and donors of manuscripts. But you don't have to forget that, unlike Bangkok, Luang Prabang was a very small town where many local inhabitants could see the king or members of the royal family in daily life. Moreover, several colophons also help to sharpen our understanding of the cooperation between scribes and sponsors, but also among different sponsors or donors in the making of a manuscript. Thus, we hope that this our research, which I did not have not done alone, but was also due to a collaborative effort with scholars and local staff in Luang Prabang, will stimulate further research on these widely neglected aspects of Lao and, by extension, also Thai manuscript culture. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention.
Professor Dr. Volker Gaborski for the insightful talk, and it helps us, I guess, to understand why language, communication, and culture needs to be reclaimed.
You know what, two things that really struck me during the talk was, one of them was actually how knowing languages, a lot of languages, is actually part of becoming a cultured person. Don't you think so? Like Ajahn, Professor Dr. Grabowski can actually speak Thai very clearly.
Yes.
And that's really, that's really amazing. The second part is when I saw the pictures of Luang Prabang, a wave of nostalgia really came over me because I went there one time too. Have you been there before? To Luang
No,
Prabang?
never.
It's really beautiful. You should really take a chance to visit Luang Prabang one day.
I will.
Yeah.
Okay, and now we would like to invite questions from our audience members. If you have any questions, there is a microphone. Okay, you can use the microphone in.
Atanka, one question. How expensive is it to get this made, the colophon? Because it seems to me like the donor asks a lot in return. They ask for a lot in return, like to be born a Luk Sethi, like, to reach Nirvana. So it's not reciprocal to me.
You mean about the
to get it written, to get it produced. Right.
How to say?
Yeah.
The money which the donor or the sponsor would have to pay, to
right.
the scribe. I mean, it has to pay for the material.
Oh, for the material and for the whole
It's not
process.
that. Former times it was, palm trees, were abundant, and
Right.
so that was not that expensive. Nowadays, it's much more expensive to procure palm leaf as writing support.
Yeah.
But we have very few information about the remuneration of scribe. Luckily, I came across a Papsa manuscript from Mueang Sing in northern Laos, bordering China. And this manuscript just consists of entries by a rich person, a local businessman who recorded all his spendings, donations to the Sangha, including the making of manuscripts, but not only,
Yeah.
over a period of 50 years. And he records it and minutiously, very detailed, the number of fascicles of manuscript, the names of the titles of the manuscripts, and then the money he spent.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a very rare source, and the colophons themselves, they hardly mention the price. So, I mean, it's quite difficult to reconstruct, I mean, over the, generations, these, katang, it's, just guesswork, but I would say it's not so, it has not, in former times, not that expensive when compared to donations for the making of Buddha images or other much more extensive donations. I mean, because at that former times, scribes were, available, abundantly available, and it was the main task of monks to copy manuscripts. So that was not that difficult.
And the revival of the production in southern China that you show in one picture, is it done for commercial purpose? Because I see a lot of people are collecting this now, and they use that not to make merit, but they bought it for the sake of collection.
You have to differentiate between various kinds of manuscripts. There are manuscripts that contain religious texts and that are actually just produced for being handed over to a monastery. But the scribes that I visited, and there were more than 24 scribes, they produced manuscripts containing secular texts, secular literature, including chronicles, for example, and for their personal use. They kept these manuscripts in their homes, and would also be the users of the manuscripts themselves. So you have to differentiate between different kinds of texts. But of course, you have, because religious texts are being produced to be used in the monasteries, and most cases these are lay people who would just sponsor the making of these manuscripts for making merit. So in order to improve the prospects of their future existences, as explained.
Okay, we have time for one more question, if you have any questions. Oh yes, you can use the microphone. There, okay.
In the beginning of your presentation, you showed a table showing the evolution of languages from Pallavi, which is in South India. And we know in South India there is not much of the so-called literature of about the teaching of Buddha. So how does all these jatukas and other things that you have shown in the next tables, they actually came to be translated, also called evolve, and be a part of this new phenomenon in this region. So there seems to be some sort of gap, because originally all the scriptures were in Pali. Pali is not exactly the same as Pallavi.
No, the so-called Pallava script, actually you can say it's variant of the Brahmi script from southern India, and it came to Southeast Asia already in the first half of the first millennium, the 3rd, 4th centuries AD, and were used for stone inscriptions. I mean, as I said, we don't have very old witnesses of palm leaf manuscripts. The oldest in Thailand are from the 15th century, second half of the 15th century. But the stone inscriptions are much older, and I mean, it has nothing to do with the spread of Buddhism, because the earliest inscriptions are not in the vernacular languages, but in Sanskrit.
Okay, thank you very much. And now, next I would like to invite Assistant Professor Dr. Jaray Singhakowen, Dean of the Graduate School of Language and Communication, to present a token of appreciation to our guest speaker.
Thank you so much, sir.
ก็ผมก็ขอบคุณด้วยนะครับ
And please don't go away yet, because our next session is really important. Fasten yourself to your seat now. It's actually a topic on ASEAN in ASEAN, how Cambodia, Thailand, and Laos view ASEAN and AEC. Please don't go away yet. May I have this opportunity to welcome our moderator, Dr. Ari Manosutikit, and the 4 panelists onto the stage, please.
เอาเริ่มไหม Okay. Okay, good morning everyone, and welcome again to our session. My name is Ari Manosutikit. I'm a faculty member at the School of Language and Communication. I'll be moderating this panel discussion today. And as you can see, we already have our panelists right here with me. We will start with the first panelist, Assistant Professor Dr. Sawitri Kathawanit. She's a project director and project leader working on the representations of ASEAN in the Lao media. So as the project director, she basically the big boss of the project, and she coordinated and put together, and this is the outcome of her work, a very thick book and very quality one, so very impressive. And the second panelist that we have here is Assistant Professor Dr. Jaray Singhakowen. He's a project leader working on the Thai media. And also he's Dean of the Graduate School of Language and Communication, another big boss. And the third panelist is Assistant Professor Dr. Ketganda Chaturungkachok. She's the project leader working in the Cambodian media. And the last panelist, Mr. Kietapong Rekwanchai. He's a project assistant to Dr. Savitri, working on the Lao media, and he's also our PhD candidate at the School of Language and Communication. And today, he has to wear 2 hats, because in addition to being on the panel, he also has to be my co-moderator. So you see him coming up with questions, smart questions from time to time. All right. And next, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this person. She's a project consultant for this project, because as the project was going on, she offered new and fresh insights to everyone in the team. And that is Associate Professor Dr. Warisa Osathanan. In the back right here. She's right here, although she's not joining us. Her expertise lies in phonetic and phonological aspects of Thai and Lao dialects. All right. And I think I have to mention 3 more people. They are not here today. They are not able to make it, but I have to say that they're very instrumental Okay, sorry, I forgot to move the slides. All right. Those are our panelists, as you can see, sitting here already. And next, this is a project assistant that I just introduced, and this is how she looks. A project consultant, I apologize. And these are the three people I'm going to talk about. They are our project assistants. They're very instrumental to the success of our project. Three of them, Dr. Direk Hong Tong, Ms. Chanapa, Muang Ngam Sombun, and Ms. Ratcha Chao Siri. So a very hardworking bunch, and I said very helpful to the project. And last but certainly not least, we have two distinguished guests from other institutions that I feel very honored to introduce. They graciously accepted our invitation to be on this panel as discussants. The first discussant is Professor Volker Grabowski. Is he here? He's on the phone outside. Okay, he'll be right back in here later. Professor Grabowski is from the Thai Language and Culture Department at the Asia and Africa Institute of the University of Hamburg, and he specialized in the history and culture of Thai people, TAI, in mainland Southeast Asia and Southwest China. His interest lies in the history and historiography of the region. That's our first discussant. And our second one, the second discussant is Dr. Noraset Pisit Panporn from Mahidol University. He's sitting right here on your right. Dr. Noraset is specialized in Khmer language, society, arts, and culture. And both of them will be joining us later in the second half of this session, not right now. And before I start the panel discussion, let me tell you the structure of this panel. We're going to have three segments. In the first segment, we're going to talk about the representations of ASEAN in three different countries. And in the second segment, the discussion will be more open, more analytical, more critical, and more freestyle. And that's when we'll have our two discussants over on stage. And in the last segment, of course, the Q&A, and that's when we are open to your questions or even suggestions and comments. Okay. All right. I think at this point, all of you in the audience probably cannot wait to hear about, oh, here, this is Professor Volker Grabowski. Okay, all right. So we'll start with the first question about this project. So as a project leader, Dr. Savitri, can you give us an overview of this project? What is it about and how it came about and why representations and why these three countries?
appear in almost any media outlet. And it come across that, to me, that, well, with the population of the ASEAN community of around 630 people from 10 countries, can we actually see the same vision, same identity, and sharing the same community in the way that the media is trying to tell us? So this project comes about, and it is quite an ambitious project in the sense that I would like to do the 10 countries and how each country sees ASEAN and also the ABC. So the project is divided into phases. So the first phase, I start with Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia. And you might ask why? Why these three countries? Well, the first reason is that, well, Thailand, well, this is obvious because we are in Thailand and the media here is, well, easily accessed for us. But not only that, Thailand is one of the three founding members of ASEAN. So this is the representative of those who have been in ASEAN from the very beginning, from 1961. And the latter two, like Laos, that I was doing a project on, and also Cambodia that Ajahn Kekanda is doing a project on. Laos and Cambodia represent the two most latest member of ASEAN see and compare if there is any different view that each country have about this community that we are having.
All right. And I think we have another question. I think this question is more related to the event. And maybe, Gedipong, you want to ask that question?
Given the theme of this conference, language, reclaiming language, culture, and communication, how do you see this project as being part of a larger theme? Or in a way, how does this project contribute to this theme, the reclamation of these three entities?
So let me confirm again that the theme that I remember is reclaiming language, communication, and
Culture
culture.
and communication for
Okay,
a sustainable society. A long one.
Again, please.
Okay, it's reclaiming language, culture, communication for a sustainable society.
Wow. The dean, can I have? Okay, so to me, when I was proposing this panel, I think this panel can give a tangible evidence, tangible example of what language, communication, and culture is. Well, these three words are very abstract and can be variably defined. But down to this research, which is quite empirical, I would define language here as the discourse of the news. Okay? And the communication is the mass media in each country. And culture here, I'm thinking about something that we are sharing, like ideology, identity, and also the idea, the very idea about ASEAN that we have, that we think we have. So the project is conducted in a way that connects all these three together and trying to give an example of how these three terms actually correlate with one another in a dialectical manner. So I hope it would do this task.
So I think what Dr. Sami just mentioned, it's partly analogous to an abstract or a rationale of this project. And I think she covers the ground pretty well. And I think we can move on to the next part, which is the media landscape, because I think when we talk about the media landscape, I'm talking about the social or cultural, political conditions that shape these news or news practices or media practices. So I think it's very, very important to talk about it as a background information. So if anyone on this panel talk about the media landscape of each country, briefly, like 3 minutes for each person. I know we can talk forever about the media landscape, but please make it brief.
When we first discussed this issue, that we would analyze the media, and I said that well, we have to start with the media habit, the media consumption habit of the people. But unfortunately, the funder did not allow us to travel to any country that we were working on. So we make our adjustment to the media landscape. And you know that in this part of the world, in this free country, we have like the full limitation of freedom of press, like in the case of Laos. And then at the other end, we have Thailand, right, in which the media are quite free. And for my case, Cambodia stands in the middle with its history of the media at the beginning with the French colonization and newspaper was controlled by the French for fear that it would invoke nationalism. And then after that, King Sihanouk used the media a lot to gain certain things, like to get Thailand to fight, to get Cambodians to fight with Thailand over Khao Phraphihan issue. And then after that, you see the Khmer Republic with Lon Nol, who limit freedom of the press, the left-wing press. And then we have, of course, the Vietnamese occupation, the communist first, where the media, the newspaper did not exist at that time. And then moving towards Vietnamese control, and then Hun Sen, who owns a couple of newspapers, and used it as a propaganda tool. And right now, like in Thailand, newspapers are finding it difficult to survive economically. So the media in Cambodia now do find a few newspapers who have to side with the political parties so that they can make their ends meet. And I guess Thailand is better, but they try to survive economically too.
Okay. I'd just like to speak on behalf of the Thai Section project. Even though Thai media enjoys such a relatively freedom of the press, but as we all know, nowadays many people are worried whether they're going to be summoned for attitude adjustment or not. Not to mention that the libel cases in Thailand, so far for the past 10 years, we have seen an increase of libel cases in Thailand, and reporters are not exception. That's why we're also aware of these limitations. However, when framing this project, we think about what would be the best news source to cover these media representation of ASEAN or ASEANers. And we have such a debate, and in the end, we conclude that we're going to focus on the news, the opinion editorials of tabloid newspaper. And in Thailand, we have quite a number of tabloid newspapers, namely Thai Rat, Khao Sot, Om Chat Lerk, etc. But our team chose Thai Rat with the claim of Thai Rat that they have the most circulation in the country. And as you know, even though people might argue that why focusing on such a traditional media source, newspaper, but Thai Rat nowadays not only have their outlets in newspaper, but they also have that television, digital television channel, and also Thai Rat website is one of the longest running news website in Thailand. And also, since Thai journalists enjoy such a relatively freedom of speech, more or less they are often regarded, like in the West, as the fourth estate, people who get benefits that they often criticize politicians or people in power. And as we know, that they also have the tradition to give nicknames to politicians around the end of each year. So we think Thai Rat might be a good source. And also for the Thai research team, it is the information can be accessed very easily. We have a software, or I'm not sure software, or interface website called ICLC2017, which allow you to retrieve all the published news sources in Thailand. So that's why we choose Thai Rat. And also that's and the other reason that why we choose tabloid newspaper is because we want to focus on how ASEAN is represented. The representation or the image, or in other terms, discourse, the interaction between the text and the people who read it. That's why we think tabloids might be a good option, since they are not limited by maybe by the tone of the news or the style of writing, and also the simplicity that they try to communicate to the readers, or the majority of people.
And talking about accessibility, I understand that the other two countries have problems getting newspapers Right. Like for example, in the case of LPDR Laos, I mean, some of the newspapers, because I was working on it myself too, some of the newspapers could not be accessed online. You need like a national ID in order to gain access to those newspapers. And the reason, and that's actually part of the reason why we finally chose two particular newspapers. The first one is Vientiane Chiang Mai, and the other one is KPL. And the reason that we chose Vientiane Chiang Mai is because of the largest circulation, and also again it could be accessed online. And the other newspaper was KPL, which could be said to be sort of a prototype for other news media in the country, because all of them have to kind of use KPL as sort of, how should I say this, as a template. Yes, thank you. As a template, yeah, when they want to report news in the country. And Jackie, could you talk a little bit about the data in case of Cambodia, because I understand it is difficult to.
It's difficult to get it too. So we direct first wanted to do Rasami Cambodia, I think, but they did not have any archive that we could retrieve. And I Facebook a student, a former student in Phnom Penh, and he said that it would be very difficult for him to get anything for us. So we had to switch to Phnom Penh Post, which we can retrieve the data online. So that's the limitation. It would have been more fun to do Rasami Cambodia. It would have been more fun.
Okay, and we're still on the methodology, I think, and I want to ask you. I mean, I believe that each country, like Laos, Thailand, and Cambodia, the government probably allows different degrees of freedom for the press. So I don't know if this has anything to do with these choices of newspapers that you made, and because Thailand is more private, and I think Laos, your newspaper is more of from the government. Or the limitation in expressing the opinions probably is less than any other.
Well, I don't know whether there is any word that is more reflect the situation of Laos better than the word control, because control is, well, Laos. Let's say that Laos has the same kind of media operation in the same fashion as Vietnam or China. It is very strictly regulated, and it is one of the least, one of the countries with the least media freedom. And to the point that, as Kiatipong has mentioned, Lao news, no matter what outlet that you access the news, is presented in the same vein as the news released by KPL. KPL stands for Khao San Pratet Lao, so it can be compared to something like Samnak Khao Thai news agency. So it cannot go against or in any other way that is different from this. So, well, this is a kind of regime that we are working under. So this makes things quite difficult for us because, well, first of all, in order to test whether the template has its script all over Laos, we take both two newspapers, KPL News, which is the newspaper released by KPL itself, and also Vientiane Chiang Mai. Vientiane Chiang Mai, or Vientiane Chiang Mai for that matter. In fact, it's an interesting case because it is the newspaper circulated within Kamphaeng Phanakhon, which is within Vientiane only, but it has the largest circulation. And the largest, I'm talking about like 5,000 a day, and that is large by that standard. So the two, even though I look at two newspapers, but believe it or not, I cannot find any news that is marked off as opinion editorial. So that's why for Laos case, we have to take all the data that we have, searching with a keyword like AEC, ASEAN, and then everything that comes up, we analyze all that. So we ended up with 117 news in order to cover the loss that we don't have the opinion editorial.
Right. And in other countries like Thailand? How many news pieces have you got for your data analysis?
Initially, we've got tens of thousands.
Right.
editorials. So we have to sift through these mass amount of information, even though some editorials contain words like ASEAN, ASEANET, AEC. We only use 13 pieces of news editorials because these 13 pieces did discuss in detail about ASEAN and also about relationships of countries in the ASEAN community. So that's why from 10 of thousands, it came down to just 13 editorials.
Right. So, so I think, Cambodia, you want to talk a little bit about the data? Okay. That's okay. The reason I'm saying...
Roughly it's the same as Lao. Direct came up with quite a few, and I said, cut. You don't want to do too much. Because it's similar, complaints,
Right.
about not ready, about like the issue of non-readiness of the country to enter the union. And I said, cut by a lot, It has to be, you can't allow it to spin out of direction when you do research like this, right? It has to be within a manageable time frame. And with even that, we ran late, like by 1 year or something. We were late by a year.
Okay. Right. The reason why we talk about the media landscape and how it affects our data collection and the whole research process, because it also, I'm also working on the Myanmar project, and I can really see that the situation in Myanmar also influences the number of news and opinions articles that we've got, because Myanmar still is not so interested in ASEAN, and that's why there's not a lot of news about ASEAN. And just like Thailand and Cambodia, we don't have a lot of op-ed articles for analysis. So, even though for a different reason. Okay, let's move on to the next part.
Yes, findings and analysis. And the question is, what are the salient themes that you found, each country found?
Right.
Could you talk a little bit about the themes or the representations that you found in the data?
Basically, economic came up about we find pros and cons. We found pieces that favor the union, and we found pieces that complain that the country would not be ready for the union, and we found pieces that reflect on the hopelessness of the whole region. This is the union of the poor, the union of the powerless, the union of the blind leading the blind, and the hopelessness of Cambodia as a country, that they had to beg for help from here and there. If not from this, then if not from the United States, Cambodia went to China. So that's the basic theme that we found.
Okay, what about Laos?
Lao, this is going to be entirely different. Even though we, Lao and Cambodia come from the same status in terms of economics and politics and things like that, but with the opinion of Cambodia, which is quite pessimistic about things, Laos has a very rosy view about future or even the present time of ASEAN, in a sense that Laos sees ASEAN as part of them. And ASEAN, within ASEAN, there's no boundaries between nations. If you look at the Laos news, and you would find that, they would report the news of perhaps Minister of Thailand doing something about ASEAN in the same way that they present the shore that the Lao minister is doing themselves. So there's no such thing as demarcation between nations at all. So it seems to be quite a lot of cooperation and very little on competition. And Laos has never mentioned about anything or unfortunate about themselves. So optimistic, uncritical, and sincere would be the three tones tones that I found in Lao news. But when it comes to the theme, well, because we have to sift through all those like 117 news, so we can do some frequency analysis of words that has been employed. And we come up with 6 themes. One is about the trade, commerce, and investment. Well, of course, with the very hopeful view about how ASEAN would increase the trade, commerce, and investment in the region, not only in Laos. And also, number 2 is cooperation and collaboration. So all these emphasize the good collaboration, how the nations of ASEAN love one another to the point that we are trying to make our region better, a better place to live for everyone. And also, number 3 about Lao pride. Well, there's something that they take pride of, but the way that they talk about their pride is not offensive to others. One of the news, perhaps Kietipong can help.
Which one? Data.com? No.
About winning.
Oh, about winning in a race, I guess.
Yeah.
And in that news article, at the beginning, I guess, it says something like, oh, we are fortunate to have won this competition, and this is the first time that we won this competition.
And
so it was, I mean, they were frank about.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're saying something like, we have been participating in this sport event for many years and we have never won before. This is the first year that we won, so we are very proud of this. So this is the kind of pride that Lao project in their news without offending others. Well, that would be, the different picture would be seen very clearly from Thai case. And also, the 4th theme would be business competitiveness in ASEAN. So this is about competitiveness of the region, of the union, and how we can raise our negotiation power with the world or something like that. And number 5, self-development, how ASEAN would help us Lao to develop our country. And the last theme, well, this is something that has no particular theme, so we classified it as being information. So it's just factual, a factual report of what happened, like events, who did what to whom, where, or something like that. So these are the 6 themes that I found.
And I think Thailand.
Theme or representation?
The
themes.
Okay, themes.
I think most the 13 news, the 13 editors that we analyze seem to fall into the similar themes as other countries: economics, intra-regional competition, and also some miscellaneous topics. For example, security cooperation between ASEAN member states, or probably some international issues, for example, human trafficking or narcotic suppression, etc., etc.
Can you go on further to talk about the representations as well? Because I think this is what Laos already mentioned.
I think we seem to have similar representations for the all 3 projects. There are positive ones and negative ones. For the positive ones, they are ASEAN as a standard of accuracy, which suggests that as part of the community, we have more or less set up a kind of standardization. For example, law reforms, tax reforms, etc., or even the inter-regional cooperation to meet the Western standards. And the second representation that we found is ASEAN as a new chapter, new beginning, new world, new landscape. As you know, the end of 2015, when the 10 nations formed the economic integration, economic community, people, particularly in Thailand, I guess, had such a high hope on how ASEAN economic community would have brought to all of us. So most of what people expect from ASEAN would probably be those of economic prosperity, but particularly for Thailand, that time these ASEAN integration coincided with the expectation of the new beginning, new political beginning. Particularly at that time, the constitution was being drafted, and people expect that we would have had the early election. But of course, we know that hasn't been materialized. And the third positive representation is ASEAN as a way to end all problems. As I said earlier, those miscellaneous opinion editorials, including narcotic suppression, human trafficking, cooperation, particularly the case of mass Rohingya migrant to Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia. We hope that ASEAN will be a platform to deal with all these problems. And the fourth one is ASEAN as the alternative, the survival way out for Thailand. As you know, that Thailand, Cambodia, or Laos, compared to other powerful countries like China or Russia, which more or less are competing against the established powerful country like United States or the federation group like the EU, we cannot compete with them. So by forming an economic bloc, the editorial suggests that we might be able to negotiate our position, and particularly we might regain our international recognition, not just with the 10 countries matter more than just one voice, but with the sheer number of consumers in ASEAN countries that could amount up to 600 million. And also that could be, and also at that time in 2015 when we're collecting the data, it was, the economy of the bloc was forecast to surpass that of the old economies like the EU. And for the negative representation, the first one, ASEAN as an arena of competition. Particularly in the case of Thailand, I think Singapore was singled out as an example, and also the tone of the editorials, particularly for the Thai case, seemed to be very skeptical criticism over how Thailand seemed to lag behind other nations. As you can guess, in 2015 there was this, I'm not sure, but I think it was the UN survey or UN something about the education standard, English standard of countries in the world. It turns out that Thailand was in the last second place from the 10 nations. And the second negative representation is ASEAN as a paper tiger, which of course reflect which reflect the ASEAN policy of constructive engagement, if I'm correct, constructive engagement and non-interventionism, which more or less allow us to unite as a economic integrity that is more than 50 years old now. We don't have much of an argument compared to other economic integration. However, with these policy, we solve nothing. Look at the Rohingya, or look at the economic or even military influence from other powerful countries, for example, the USA, China, and Russia. And number three, ASEAN as a troublemaker. This particular representation reflects such a negative view that by uniting 10 diverse countries, we could create more problems, not solving problems.
Okay, so both positive and negative. And for Lao media, do you have anything to add in terms of the
Well,
representations?
For Lao media, well, despite Laos predicament, we only find the positive representation of ASEAN in Lao news. Well, there are three of them. One is ASEAN as a great investment. Another one is ASEAN as one community. And the last one would be ASEAN as a platform for competition. And all of these are presented with the same tone that is quite, well, the word skeptical might be the tone of Thai, but it's non-existent in Lao discourse whatsoever. So it's like still hopeful and still have very optimistic view about what to happen.
The Cambodian people, when you look at the pieces, and you wonder if they ever agree on anything at all, you know, because one said that, one kid said that, well, this is the union of hope, you know, it will attract, if we unite, we will attract investment. And then, you know, it is a union of people of countries that are so kind to one another. And then on the other side, say that this is a union of people fighting one another. We compete against one another. And it says that this is, well, one said that this is a strong union, and the other one said that this is a union of no power. You know, the union that lack unity. So, well, come to think of it, this is good when you analyze something like this. It is not monotonous. But I wonder if it says something about Cambodian at all. That, you know, you find something on at one end of the continuum and at the other end of the continuum, which makes it interesting for research. But basically, it's that.
Right. Based on what you all said, I think I have a question for Joe, because he did the comparative analysis of all the news from all three countries. It seems like the representations that you talked about represent different characteristics. It's like one family, you have three different children with different characters, right? I would say one is skeptical, one is very obedient, positive, and conflicting.
A Wednesday child.
All right. Okay.
A Wednesday child who is psychologically damaged.
I hope there's no one from Cambodia here. But since Joe, you did the comparative analysis, you see the whole picture of everything. Can you tell us, there must be some similarities? We see the differences. Yeah.
Yes, I would like to focus on the similarity here. And competition, of course, is one of the salient themes that all three countries share. But I need to point out that competition here, I mean, is interpreted in different ways in three different countries. Like, for example, in case of Laos, they see it as a side of competition, but in a good way, because it would help them open new businesses. And it's like a new era for the country and ASEAN as a whole, because again, as Dr. Savitri has mentioned, Laos is very optimistic and positive and sanguine about everything about ASEAN. But in the case of Cambodia, we have a different picture. I mean, we also talk about the same theme, competition, but again, as Ajahn Kiet Kanda has mentioned, Cambodia sees ASEAN as a site of competition again, but it also sees itself at a lower position, sort of in a disadvantageous position, and it wouldn't be able to compete with the other three countries here, and also probably in the other 7 countries that we did not talk about. And in case of Thailand, Thailand sees ASEAN as a competition arena again, but it needs to win this competition. It's going to fight, like, it's going to do everything in order to win, to be the leader of this union. So I think that's quite interesting. And there is actually, in case of Cambodia and Laos, one community is one thing that we kind of observed in our data. These two countries see ASEAN as one community that we need to strive for, like to achieve the goal of one community, one vision, one identity, which is the big umbrella that all of us are trying to strive. But it's skeptical, of course. We're not sure if we would be able to reach that goal. Yeah.
Very much. I think we have covered quite a lot of grounds about this study and its representations. And I think this discussion will be more enriched if we have two more discussants on stage with us. So I would like to invite Dr. Nora Said and Professor Grabowski on stage, right here, please. And, Oh, okay. Okay, let me start with the first question. This question is for both of you. Did you find anything from this discussion that struck you in particular? Anything that you find that you agree or disagree?
When I got a paper from the researchers, I couldn't finish reading. There are too many news. I tried to compare between English and Khmer, and then I couldn't. Then I don't follow your agenda. I want to speak what I want, okay? And I'm thinking that the newspaper in Cambodia is still very young. Just start, continue from Ajahn, just starting from 1993. Why 1993? Because in 1993 they started election, the first election. And then when the election, they start in 1993, there are many newspapers. I refer to Ajahn, say they need money. And the money investment is a kind of investment to do the business on newspaper. And then no training. Then the journalists no training. So there are two newspapers from the outside Cambodia. One is can mention it, Cambodian Daily, and the Phnom Penh Post. These are really more professional. They train young people to do research. But unfortunately, the Cambodian Daily didn't pay tax regularly, so it's already a discourse. It's already closed down. It's not against the law, but they don't have money to pay regularly, so they close themselves. But interestingly, how you choose the Phnom Penh Post is very interesting. The Phnom Penh Post is not the obedient newspaper, but it's also not very aggressive. Why? This is a question that the researcher didn't mention in the research, and then I would like to add that the techniques you select, you choose the post, the Phnom Penh Post is very, you like, that's good. So because you choose them, they survive until now. So we can learn the techniques. And when reading the news about ASEAN, it can be the ends, and also it can be means. So the Phnom Penh Post used news from ASEAN as means to criticize the government, using the third person, using Bangkok Post, refer to other sources like from Bloomberg or whatever. So it means they sincerely give information to the government, keep the face of the political leader to be maintained the face. They don't criticize directly, but they use the ASEAN news to criticize about the taxation, corruption, low standard of practical something. So it's very clever. It's a technique. Yeah, and I think it's only a news in ASEAN that they use the authors. Every news will be marked with the names of the author or writer, like Mr. Supat, Mr. Sucha, whatever. It's interesting that why you have to do that. So the Phnom Penh Post conveys something that we are sincere and we are reliable. We can be trust. You can check from people. And the editor, the Chang Wang in Khmer, is very clever. You analyze the news in English, then you get the message. But what is missing from the text is the Cambodian lexical items. It's a question of ขอบใจ and ขอบคุณ in Thai. When you say, I ขอบใจมึง ผมขอบคุณท่าน it conveys something very positive and negative. The Phnom Penh Post never used the ขอบคุณ to Hun Sen. The Phnom Penh Post used the ขอบใจ only. It means, especially, I don't know how many news that mention about Hun Sen in ASEAN, but the Phnom Penh Post been talk about Hun Sen say or speak. The Post used the แถลง They never used the เมียนภาษา In Cambodia, when newspaper mention about Hun Sen talk, they say, สมเด็จอัครมหาเดโช Hun Sen เมียนภาษาตา But for the Phnom Penh Post, ลูก Hun Sen แถลงถา So it means, no, I'm not aggressive, but I'm not obedient to you. I use the very common, because you are a politician, you like your people. So that we cannot see from the news, unless we have to look at what vocabulary. And what you say, the title, สมเด็จอัคร the title already deleting. It's only the ลูก. It's really, like in Thai, you don't say พระท่าน นายประยุทธ์จันทร์โอชา or whatever. So it means the news, the post, the Phnom Penh Post has very good standpoint. Yeah. Anyway, there's also a cultural issue about the people are like in Cambodian, people don't talk, don't criticize in public. They can criticize in website underground. Yes, especially from Long Beach, California, they can do it. But if you criticize people in Cambodia, even use Facebook, the police will come to invite you to come to the police station. So it means to criticize people publicly, it's something like a taboo. The Phnom Penh Post never criticize political leaders publicly, but they use the third person. That's the first, what do you think? Then come to the concept of a survival for newspaper. The project conduct 3 years ago. 3 years ago, but the situation now changed a lot. So 3 years ago, when you research on that, people enjoy freedom. They can support the political parties. They can also support the opposite party. But 4 years ago, when the last election, the number of people who vote for the opposite parties are going up. That is a problem for the future government, because the newspaper is not only given the information, given for education, they also use the refer back to Ajahn mentioned that during the Sihanouk period, they use the newspaper for political campaign. So the opposite party use a lot of the news for a political campaign, especially refer back to the newspaper that didn't pay tax that one already, because they promote the opposite party. That's very sensitive. For the campaign post, they never do that. They never support. never interview the opposite party, never. It just mentioned that, refer back to this, that, those. Mr. Sukha say that, something like that. So this is what I want to say, the situation in Cambodia.
Okay, thank you very much. So basically, Ajahn Norsay was talking about the linguistic tactics that the newspaper have been using. And this is something that probably is missing in our data because we use a translation. Maybe we didn't really see the language that is originally used or see it in such an insightful way like the way Ajahn Norsay has seen. Okay, Ajahn, get in there.
We translated it from Cambodia, but I think Dilek was caught up in looking at what we frame him to do. So he did not look at the tactic of the newspaper per se. But yeah, like Dr. Norsay mentioned, Phnom Penh Post is very intelligent news. We could not find editorial page like this, but we had to analyze opinion. So the closest thing is article on ASEAN that were written by people from different sectors that submit their article to Phnom Penh Post. So that's the closest that we can come up with for comparison. So, but he did translate it from Cambodia, from original text. But he might have. Well, we could not go into detail as to look at the linguistic tactic of the newspaper.
Right. Thank you very much, Ajahn Ketganda. And Professor Grabowski, do you have anything to add to our discussion?
Yeah, first of all, my great compliment to Dr. Savitri and her team of researchers for having accomplished a very innovative research, and I spent most of the afternoon and evening yesterday reading dozens of pages, very, very exciting, I would say, and impressive, the results. Some of the results maybe I would have expected, and others were more surprising, I would say. Concerning the case of the Lao media, of course, I was much interested in, especially in the case of Laos, because I have been living in Laos in the late 90s, so around 20 years ago, when I was been teaching at the National University of Laos in Vientiane, and I've been traveling to Laos almost every year since then. So I have this long-term perspective on Lao media. And of course, the differences to the Cambodian case are striking. I mean, Cambodia since 1993 is actually a country with a multi-party system. Although the ruling People's Party actually controls most of, the political scene at the national but also provincial levels, but we have a different atmosphere than in Laos, where actually there's only one party. The Lao People's Revolutionary Party controlling everything, and even in national elections you can only vote for maybe different members, candidates, but they come all from the same party. So it is not surprising to see that Lao newspapers, and I found it quite, interesting to observe your observation that all these tabloids, whether it's the party organ Basason or Vientiane Mai or Alun Mai, or even the English language newspapers like the Vientiane Times and the French newspaper Le Rénovateur, are actually based at the same place, at the same building. So I suppose that is not the case in Thailand, of course, and also not in Cambodia, but that, that's really true. It's the same building, and so the newspapers actually, they can control themselves, though even the government does not have to exercise censorship, because I mean, there will be self-censorship, you know, if you operate in such a closed environment. There's actually only variations of one and the same newspaper, you can say, you know. The only diversity in, I mean, just the opposite, monolithic unity with regard to the representation of news. But I would say there's also some certain development over the years. So when I arrived in Laos in '96, at our Department of Lao Language and Literature, we had only one newspaper, Basason, and I mean, Vientiane Mai, I remember, appeared much later. And nowadays, I mean, it's Vientiane Mai, you know, and Basason is not really consumed that much. 20 years ago, I mean, Basason just reported about, I mean, ASEAN was not a big issue because Lao PDR had just became member, you know, of ASEAN at that time. But economic, tourism and so on, I mean, cultural issues were not that prominent, and that, I mean, is a slow change, you know, over the years or decades, which one can observe. But what has not changed is actually the distribution. I just noted down some figures for Basason, 7 to 10,000 copies, Vientiane Mai the same, Khao San Pathet Lao has 2,000 copies, and even, I mean, the Western language newspapers with 3,000 or 2,000 copies, so it's almost marginal. Even in a country of 7 million people, it's almost nothing. But I mean, Laos is maybe, if you compare to Thailand, Vietnam, and even maybe to Cambodia, it is the country in Southeast Asia where people don't like reading. And I mean, book publication is maybe only 1% or less than book publication in Thailand. I mean, the time when I was living in Laos, we had only 2 bookshops in Vientiane. I mean, no bookshop in Luang Prabang, and maybe one, I don't know, what Savanakhet or Pakse. And that has not changed very much over the years. So newspapers are only read, I mean, by whom? I mean, by government officials or my colleagues at the university. They read the newspaper because, I mean, they were all members of the party. But the population at large would probably, very few people would really consume newspapers. And I think that makes a very big difference to Thailand and probably even Cambodia. On page 99, I noted the sentence, speaking of other social actors who are neither from the state nor from private sectors. In the Lao case, they are almost non-existent. That means there's no Pracha Sangkom, no civil society. And that makes a difference to Thailand, which has a very strong civil society, and even Cambodia. So that might explain why Lao newspapers are, I mean, just propaganda machine of the Paklat party and state, you know, which is a frequently used phrase, you know, everything, you know, has to be in accordance with the party and state, or party and government. And in the Cambodian case, you obviously have got much more diversity. And the Phnom Penh Post, I had subscribed it in the late 90s and until I think 2005 or so. And then because they got, I mean, financial issues because it was being too expensive, I no longer subscribe this newspaper, but I found it very much more interesting than, for instance, Vientiane Times. I mean, even if nowadays, as you said, the people in the Phnom Penh Post is much more hesitating to criticize the government or just to also give a voice to the opposition. but I would say compared to Vientiane times, they still give more room for alternative views than those of the government. But I have one question to Ajahn Naraset. Is there a big difference between the Khmer and the English version of Phnom Penh Post? Or
But then again, please.
is there a big difference between, with regarding to news reporting and also with regard to the representation of ASEAN in the English edition of Phnom Penh Post, which is mostly read by foreigners living in Cambodia, and the Khmer edition, which you analyzed in your research project?
We're talking about the communication. So the audience of the Phnom Penh Post partially is readers who live abroad. Those who still read the Khmer, they use the internet. And partially is foreigners who are working in Cambodia, and also young university students who want to practice English. They read the newspaper for practice English, so there are two different audience. But anyway, it's similar to Laos in that people don't read. It's a few people who use internet, just use the Latin or whatever, but they enjoy listening. So the limit of the Phnom Penh Post is that they still have no listening the machine, unlike Voice of America. People just sitting on the mango trees and listen the whole day. But for the Phnom Penh Post, I think the limit of the people who can access to buy a newspaper is still very, very low, very low. So just only the upper echelon people who can obtain and use the internet. Yeah, because of the culture of listening, not reading. Yeah, that had to change to the literacy, because people, they difficult to access to the reading. They're just listening.
I have one question out of curiosity. Well, when I went to Vientiane and also Luang Prabang a couple of years ago to do the field work, I observed the same thing that Ajahn Fokker mentioned about the fact that there's very hard to find bookstore and even harder to find news stall. And to find an actual newspaper is very hard in Vientiane, and not to mention in Luang Prabang, where newspapers are non-existent whatsoever. So I was wondering if the newspaper is becoming more responsive to the need and interest of people. Would that increase the amount of readers? Because right now the news in Laos is very formulaic, as I said. So it doesn't respond to the interest of the people, because it seems to be, like you said, again, propaganda tool of the government. It just report what the government want to say without considering whether the people want to hear or not. So if the newspaper becomes more responsive to the interest of people, will it increase the amount of readers?
Question.
Next question.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
From observation, visiting to Laos, I've noticed that even though people don't have such a literacy culture compared to Thailand, but they have such a fast internet speed. And also, Laos people, they have consumed a lot of media text from Thailand. Even in karaoke shop, they sing Thai songs. They watch Thai soap operas, and they even watch Thai news. So maybe the fact that technology can bypass such censorship or even the monotonous self-representation of Lao media, that could be possible.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, I would like to talk a little bit about the big picture, ASEAN in general. Especially, this question is actually for you, Professor Vogel. In one of your articles, you talk about Cambodia allows being a kind of buffer state, right, located between two powerful nations, Thailand and Vietnam, and that actually contributed to the sense of national extinction between these two countries Cambodia allows. Do you think that with the official launch of ASEAN, do these two countries still have the same feeling, or has it changed, in your opinion? Yeah. The sense of losing national identity, because at that time they were afraid of.
I mean, the case of Laos and Cambodia cannot really be compared because Cambodia actually never ceased to exist as a political entity. I mean, it had been in the late 18th and the first half of the 19th century vassal state of Siam, but I mean, still under their own king, you know, and at the same time also paying tribute to the imperial court at Hue. And during the French colonial rule, Cambodia proper retained its character as a political entity, as a protectorate, you know, under the Cambodian king, you know, as a head of state. So Cambodia never ceased to exist. But in the case of Laos, I mean, in the first half of the 19th century, there was no conception of Laos at all, at the beginning of the 20th century. And if you, the quite interesting PhD thesis by Søren Iverson about the making of Laos, and he noted that both Siamese and Vietnamese map did not acknowledge the existence of Laos at all. I mean, we could also have imagined that without the French, Laos probably would have faced the same fate as Isan. Actually, you know, the Isan region that constitutes the most precious part of the Lao kingdom, or and just had been absorbed, you know, by Thailand, being a part of Thailand. So it was more or less a matter of chance that a concept of Lao identity emerged slowly, gradually during the first half of the 20th century. And I would say it's not only created by the French, but also by members of the Lao elite in Luang Prabang, like Jamaha Upahat Petsalat, who negotiated skillfully the emergence of Lao autonomous rule, first over northern Laos and then expanding it to the whole kingdom. So the Lao actually had, I mean, there's really a break, a historical break between the kingdom of Lan Xang I mean, ended existence in the course of the 18th century, and the new Lao nation state. And that had some, they are like the Polish people in Europe, you know, hating the Russians, hating the Germans, always being suppressed by both of them, but at the same time also being very ambitious and over-ambitious, maybe sometimes unrealistic, provoking both neighbors, then thinking back of their of the past, the glorious past, where they were the most powerful nation in the region. So the Cambodians are a bit like the Poles in Europe, and this may also explain their ambiguous attitude that you, Ajahn Gekanda, described. The Cambodians actually would, I mean, still dreaming about, the return of the glorious past, and maybe it's not only ASEAN that may be a vehicle to fulfill that goal, but also, China. So I think China might be maybe at least as important, much important for Cambodia as ASEAN. To counterbalance the historical arch enemies, Thailand and Vietnam.
So, okay, quite an analogy between different countries and across continents. Because we are running out of time, I think I'll have to come to the last question. And I think that's a very important question because that's the reason why they are started this project in the first place, and that is how can we reach this one vision, one identity, one community that ASEAN would like to achieve. And we talk about different perspectives from the different representations in 3 different countries, not to mention the differences within each country. We have diversity in each country and diversity across ASEAN countries. Now, what do you think, in your opinion, all the panelists and discussants, briefly, 1 minute at least, maybe just 1 minute, can you tell us whether it is possible that we will reach or get to that point, unity in diversity?
In reality, it's very difficult to be ASEAN, one, whatever, because they have a lot of the historical background. But what I would like to suggest for the new generation, for young people to come, try to understand each other, especially try to learn the language, to understand the culture, to understand the people way of life, and to go together. Recently, when I read the report, Cambodians feel like a disadvantage or something. That is, sometimes they also disadvantage. But look at other country, it's the same. So the question is, if you keep oneself to know only you is a center, you are a center point, not a shopping center, you are a center point. But try to be not a center, try to learn the language, the culture, understand people, also understand the geographical situation. Cambodians have to rely on Thailand for a survival because of the 6 months hot season, 6 months the raining season. They have to move to Thailand, and Thailand have to rely on Cambodian for some help. So wait, nothing special, just learn to know people, that's all. That's what I'm thinking in order to achieve what we are going to be. Yeah.
Right, interaction at the individual level. Next, Thailand. Oh, Laos first, I think you, or Thailand. Okay.
To me, I think, well, one vision, one identity. If identity is to mean homogeneity, I think it's unattainable. It's not going to happen with people with such a diverse ethnicities, languages, and cultures like we have. It's not going to happen in the same way that it doesn't happen at the EU. And that's why EU come up with a very ingenious solution. That is, they define the word identity as diversity. And I think this might be the identity that we would like. We would have to have the same vision, that we are going to live with someone who are not exactly the same as us. And what we need to do is to understand one another, raise awareness of the fact that we are different. We are born differently, we are raised differently, and we're thinking differently. And we don't have to think like others, but just accept the difference. And I think this project is perhaps doing its best in revealing the different pictures of the real situation that we have to to live in, and hope that we can coexist as a family. And well, being a family doesn't mean that the mother and father has to be the same. We all have different role, different duty. And together, if we love one another, we can go quite far. So that's what I hope from this project.
I think it's very difficult to come to terms with these two contrasting ideology, universality and particularity. On the one hand, we have to accept that people are the same. They are all human beings. So maybe the UN Declaration, 1949, that's a good start. However, people have different needs. People have desire to be, for others to recognize that they are different. So that's something that we have to come to terms, and I also like to support other John's idea that, so it's not just the idea of diversity, but we have to also be willing to compromise our standard, and sometimes we also need to be more tolerant of one another present. And I think tolerance, yes, tolerance is a key.
If there's no one else, I would like to. Oh, I'm sorry, Professor.
No. Just one addition, because maybe I'm the only one sitting here who comes from a member state of the European Union, and I just observed that, I mean, according to your research, the EU, I mean, the model, as a model, or maybe as something which you might not use as a model, you know, is not really reflected in the articles of the Thai, Lao, or Cambodian newspapers. And I would say that maybe, of course, it is impossible for ASEAN to follow the European model, and I'm not quite sure whether the European model, you know, would really, I mean, survive in the long run if you just force people who have different experiences, come from, I mean, have lived under different political regimes, also economic regimes, just follow the same way, you know. Especially in the cases of crises, this would backfire, and I mean, I will not talk too much about the present situation in Europe, but you all, you know the news, the Brexit, you know, and I mean the tension that we have between some Western European countries and many countries in former East Central Europe with our currency. I mean, in the case of ASEAN, I mean, just trying to follow this model, I mean, would actually probably lead into a disaster for ASEAN, and I don't think that this level of integration, as we have seen in Europe, would really be possible in Southeast Asia, at least during the next 2 or 3 decades, I would guess.
Okay, if there's, okay, I think right now I need to probably move on to the next part, the last part, which is the questions from all of you. If you have any questions.
If not lunch.
Somebody's hungry here. Okay. So if there's no question, so I would like to end our session here. And Gittipong would you like?
Yes, okay. And so now I would like to invite Assistant Professor Dr. Jerry Singhakongwin, Dean of the School of Language and Communication, to present a token of appreciation, yes, to our discussants. I'll start first with Ajahn Naraset. Discussants, the two discussants. And next, Professor Volker, please. ได้ครับ All right, thank you very much. Thank you all the panelists and the discussants. And just a couple of reminders. Please do join us for lunch on the 7th floor of this building. So you take the elevators, go up to the 7th floor. And also, please return your evaluation form to our staff members at the registration desk. And also, concurrent sessions would take place on the 8th floor of this building. So lunch will be on the 7th floor, concurrent sessions on the 8th floor. And it will start at 1:15. Thank you for your great participation. Thank you so much.